In World War II, America's enemies owned the sky. Faster planes, better trained pilots, enemy aces who destroyed entire squadrons before America even fired a shot. But 10 men changed that, and they did it by becoming the deadliest hunters in American history. The son of Methodist missionaries raised in India, nobody saw Robert Hanson coming. On January 14, 1944, escorting bombers over Simpson Harbor, one of Japan's most fortified strongholds at Rabaul, Hanson was cut off from his squadron and surrounded by Japanese Zero fighters, Japan's most agile and feared combat aircraft. He didn't retreat, he attacked, destroying 5 Zeros alone deep in enemy territory until he ran out of ammunition and fuel and had no choice but to turn back to Barracoma Airfield on Vella Lavella Island. That mission wasn't an anomaly, it was an introduction, because what followed was the most concentrated killing streak of the entire Pacific Air War. 20 enemy planes in just 17 consecutive flying days. His Medal of Honor citation described a man who fought with devastating fury, waging lone battles against superior numbers with what the Marine Corps called a total disregard for death. While other pilots relied on formation discipline, Hanson thrived alone. And over the Solomon Islands, flying his F-4U-1 Corsair with the Fighting Corsair Squadron, that instinct made him almost untouchable. 25 confirmed victories in under 6 months, the third highest scoring Marine ace of the entire war, behind only Boyington and Foss, with 18 of those kills being Japanese Zeros. The war took him before he could fully comprehend what he'd become. On February 3rd, 1944, anti-aircraft fire struck his Corsair over Cape St. George. His wingman, Lieutenant Harold Spears, flying close above, watched helplessly as Hanson's right wing struck the water. The plane twisted violently, rolled, and vanished beneath the surface. Only floating debris remained. The USS Hanson, a destroyer named in his honor, would later sail the same waters that swallowed him. 25 kills fought alone. But the next pilot's deadliest weapon was a childhood spent hunting jackrabbits on a South Dakota prairie. What made Joe Foss different started long before he ever sat in a cockpit. As a boy, he hunted jackrabbits with a .22 rifle, and what that taught him, firing not where a target is, but where it's going to be, was deflection shooting, the single hardest skill in aerial combat. Most fighter pilots spent entire careers never mastering it. Foster had it before the Marines ever handed him a plane. He arrived at Henderson Field, Guadalcanal, in October 1942 as executive officer of VMF 121, the Fighting Falcons, part of the Cactus Air Force operating from a battered dirt airstrip that was bombed, shelled, and attacked almost daily. Within his first 12 days, he'd already downed 16 aircraft. By October the 25th, he became the first Marine Corps ace in a day, destroying 5 Japanese fighters across 2 sorties. He led 8 pilots, Foss's Flying Circus, a tight, disciplined unit he divided into farm boys and the city slickers, who together recorded 164 combined victories over Guadalcanal. But on the 7th of November 1942, the war nearly ended him. Shot down over the Pacific, his Wildcat hit the water hard and the canopy slammed shut, trapping him inside as water flooded the cockpit, rising fast. He forced it open, surfaced, and found himself 2 miles from shore in complete darkness. Then he saw the sharks. With nothing but a pouch of chlorine powder between him and the water around him, he scattered it across the surface and started swimming. Hours later, Malaita natives pulled him from the sea. 2 days after that, he was back over Guadalcanal shooting down more Zeros. By January 15th, 1943, Foss had matched Eddie Rickenbacker's legendary World War I record of 26 aerial victories, earning him the Medal of Honor from President Roosevelt himself. "Dogfights are normally over in a matter of seconds," he said. "If you blinked during the fight, you could die." He never did. While Foss learned to shoot on a prairie, the next pilot learned to fly barnstorming North Carolina towns in a Waco biplane, and that seat-of-the-pants education made him the most dangerous escort pilot the Luftwaffe ever faced. On the morning of August 6, 1944, Major George Preddy was in no condition to fly. He'd been up past midnight shooting craps, winning $1,200 at the officers' club after the mission was scrubbed, then unscrubbed. His group commander judged him unfit to lead, which should have ended his day before it had started, but his squadron commander vouched for him. and that one decision would produce the most devastating single mission in European theatre history. So Preddy climbed into his P-51 Mustang, cripes a mighty third, breathing pure oxygen on the climb out to sober up, and went to war anyway. East of Berlin at 30,000 feet, he spotted over 30 German Bf-109 fighter aircraft diving on a box of B-17 bombers. He plunged straight into the formation alone and shot down 3 in rapid succession. 4 other P-51s joined. He downed 2 more. Then he chased the remnants to 5,000 feet and killed a 6th in a hard-turning duel. 6 confirmed kills in a single mission, a European theatre record that was equalled but never broken. That was Preddy, a man who learned to fly not through military pipelines but from a grocery store manager named Bill Teague, barnstorming North Carolina towns in a Waco biplane. At just 125 pounds, the Navy rejected him 3 times. The man they called Mouse went to the Army Air Forces instead, and over-occupied Europe with the blue-nosed bastards of Bodny, compiled 26.83 confirmed victories, fractional because shared skills were split between pilots across 143 combat missions. On Christmas Day 1944, pursuing a lone German FW-190 at treetop level over American ground positions near Asch, Belgium, his own side opened fire. Friendly 50 caliber rounds tore through cripes a mighty. He attempted to bail out. He never made it. He was 25 years old. His squadron commander, General John C. Mayer, said it best, "I've never met a man of such intense desire to excel." George Preddy was the complete fighter pilot. While Preddy's edge was barnstorming instinct, the next pilot brought a philosopher's patience and became the highest-scoring P-38 pilot to survive the entire war. Most men study philosophy to understand the world. Charles MacDonald studied it at Louisiana State University, then applied it in the cockpit, with patience, precision, and the lead-from-the-front command style that made him one of the Pacific's most feared fighter pilots. Over Bull, New Britain, Japan's most heavily fortified naval base in the southwest Pacific, when foul weather forced every other P-38 escort flight to turn back, MacDonald pressed on alone, darting in and out of unprotected B-24 bombers, clearing Japanese Zeros off their tails, refusing to chase individual kills. His men called him a real bear for getting his money's worth on every mission. He commanded the 475th Fighter Group, Satan's Angels, flying his P-38 Lightning, always numbered 100, and named Put-Put Maru. On December the 7th, 1944, exactly 3 years after Pearl Harbor, he voluntarily led a 2-plane flight over Ormac Bay, Philippines, to cover an amphibious landing. He destroyed 1 fighter, resisted in killing a 2nd, returned to base, refueled, and took off again. 7 Japanese fighters jumped his flight from behind, shooting down his number 3 man. Outnumbered more than 2 to 1, MacDonald destroyed 2 more and set up a 3rd for his wingman. 3 kills in a single day, the 2nd time in 3 weeks he'd done it. Then there was Lindbergh. In mid-1944, Charles Lindbergh arrived at the 475th base in New Guinea as a civilian technical advisor. On July the 28th, the Japanese fighter locked onto Lindbergh's P-38 on a head-on pass. MacDonald dove in and shot it into the sea, likely saving Lindbergh's life, then received a month's punitive leave for letting the national hero get into danger. 27 confirmed victories, 3rd highest USAAF ace in the Pacific. "Flying fighters in the war," he said, "is the greatest game in the world played for the highest stakes imaginable." He survived and spent a decade sailing the same waters he'd once fought over. MacDonald led from the front and survived, but the next pilot flying over occupied Europe in a P-47 Thunderbolt, proving that surviving wasn't always the most remarkable part of the story. On June the 26th, 1943, over occupied France at 26,000 feet, 16 German Focke-Wulf 190s tore into Robert S. Johnson's P-47 formation. 21 20mm cannon shells ripped through his Thunderbolt in the opening burst. The canopy shattered. Fire erupted in the cockpit, shrapnel embedded in his leg, and a bullet grazed his nose. He tried to bail out, but the twisted canopy wouldn't open more than 6 inches, trapping him inside a burning, spiraling aircraft over enemy territory. Then German ace Hauptmann Egon Mayer closed in alone and emptied his remaining ammunition into the crippled Thunderbolt at point-blank range. Over 200 rounds, wingtip to wingtip. When his guns ran dry, Mayer pulled alongside, stared in disbelief at the P-47 still flying, rocked his wings in salute and peeled away. Johnson, half blind from oil and hydraulic fluid, nursed the shattered aircraft across the English Channel and landed at Manston. Ground crews counted 21 cannon holes and over 200 bullet strikes. What makes that survival even more remarkable is this: Johnson never officially qualified as a combat fighter pilot. At gunnery school in England, his highest score against a stowed target sleeve was 4.5% below the required 5%. His commanders privately voted him most likely to be shot down. He was sent to combat anyway due to pilot shortages, and that single administrative decision would prove to be one of the most consequential of the entire air war. Flying with the 56th Fighter Group, Zemp's Wolfpack, out of RAF Hellsworth, England, across 91 combat missions in just 13 months, Johnson became the first US AAF pilot in the European theatre to surpass Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26 victories, finishing with 27 confirmed kills. He survived the war, became a test pilot for Republic Aviation, and lived to 78. Looking back on that June day over France, he said, "I had 21 20mm cannon shells in that airplane. I'd been hurt worse playing football. However, I'd never been that scared, I'll tell you that." While Johnson's survival defined him, the next pilot's story begins not with survival, but with 28 kills, a squadron of misfits, and a direct challenge radioed to 60 enemy fighters to come up and fight. By 1941, Gregory Boyington had burned every bridge the Marine Corps had to offer. Debt, drinking, brawling, and a reputation so toxic that when he tried to rejoin after Pearl Harbor, not a single commanding officer would take him. So he did the only thing left, bypassing every officer between him and the top, telegrammed security of the Navy Frank Knox directly, and waited. Knox intervened, reinstated him as a major, and handed him the only thing nobody else wanted either: a squadron of misfits. VMF 214, the Black Sheep Squadron, was assembled in August 1943 from 27 unassigned replacement pilots, disciplinary cases, and men between combat tours, aviators the Marine Corps had effectively written off. Boyington forged them into a weapon through sheer example, flying every mission at the front of the formation, challenging anyone who doubted him to a wrestling match, and teaching them one philosophy: get close, hit hard, never give the enemy time to think. In 84 days of combat over the Solomon Islands, the Black Sheep shot down 94 enemy aircraft and produced 9 aces. Then came October the 17th, 1943, over Kali Airfield, Bougainville, one of the most heavily defended Japanese airstrips in the Pacific. Boyington led 24 Corsairs directly over the base where 60 enemy fighters sat on the ground. Rather than bomb and leave, he circled at low altitude and radioed a challenge to the Japanese. Come up and fight. They did. All 60 scrambled. In the furious dogfight that followed, Boyington's squadron destroyed 20 enemy aircraft without losing a single Corsair. He was shot down on January the 3rd, 1944, over a bull, so exhausted he'd placed tobacco in the corners of his eyes to stay alert, pulled from the water by a Japanese submarine, and spent 20 brutal months in prison camps, returning home weighing just 130 pounds. Of Boyington, his own pilot said it best: "Show me a hero, and I'll show you a bum." But if Boyington built his legend with misfits, the next pilot, number 4 on this list, built his with pure calculated aggression, becoming the highest-scoring American ace in the entire European theatre. His flight instructor told him after 6 hours in a Taylor craft that he didn't have the touch to be a pilot. A primary training, his civilian instructor gave up entirely and recommended him for elimination. Only the patience of one Army examiner, Captain Ray Wassell, who judged him marginal but worth keeping, saved his career. That near washout would go on to become the highest-scoring American ace in the entire European theatre, and the irony is that the skill that got him there came not from any flight school, but from speaking Polish. Francis Gabreski was born in Oil City, Pennsylvania, to immigrant parents who ran the Purity Market grocery store and never fully learned English. Young Francis spoke Polish at home, in the streets, in school, and when the war came, that fluency got him assigned to No. 315 Polish Squadron RAF, flying Spitfires over England alongside battle-hardened veterans who'd been fighting the Luftwaffe since 1939. What they taught him transformed everything. By the time he joined the 61st Fighter Squadron at RAF Halesworth, Gabreski had developed a philosophy so simple it was almost brutal. Wait until you're with 100 yards, then fire short, precise bursts. There's no use melting your guns, he told every wingman he ever flew with. On November the 26th, 1943, near Bremen, he dove on a formation of German Bf-110 heavy fighters prepared to tear into a B-17 bomber stream, closing so tight that exploding debris from the first kill bounced off his canopy. He climbed back up and destroyed a second. That second engagement earned him the Distinguished Service Cross and established the close kill philosophy that would produce 28 confirmed victories across 166 combat missions, the highest score of any American ace in Europe. Then on July the 20th, 1944, with his bags already packed for home and his fiancée waiting, he volunteered for one final mission. On a strafing run near Rosselheim, he violated his own iron rule, never make a second pass, and his propeller clipped the ground. He barely landed in a German wheat field, evaded capture for 5 days, and spent the remaining 10 months of the war in Stalag Luft 1. But while Gabreski's story ended in a wheat field, the next pilot's story reached heights that no American ace before or since has ever matched. In 1933, David McCampbell graduated from the United States Naval Academy expecting a commission, but the Great Depression had gutted the Navy's budget so severely that Congress eliminated nearly all new officer positions, and McCampbell, despite 4 years in Annapolis, was immediately discharged into the reserves. He spent a full year doing construction work and assembling aircraft in an Alabama plant before the Navy called him back. When they finally did, he served 2 more years aboard a cruiser before being allowed near a cockpit. Then the USS Wasp, the carrier he served on for 2 years, was torpedoed near Guadalcanal on September the 5th, 1942, and McCampbell watched it burn and slip beneath the waves. At 33, with no combat experience and a career built entirely on bad timing, he had to fight his way into a fighter cockpit. Which is what makes October the 24th, 1944 so extraordinary. Radar aboard the USS Essex detected 60 Japanese aircraft inbound toward the American fleet at Lake Gulf, the largest naval engagement in history. Only 7 Hellcats were ready to launch. McCampbell, as air group commander, had been explicitly forbidden by Rear Admiral Sherman from flying combat. He was too valuable to risk. His job was to coordinate from the ship, not fight from the sky. He ignored the order anyway, climbed into his F-6F Hellcat, Mincy III, and launched with a single wingman, Ensign Roy Rushing. What followed was 95 minutes of the most one-sided aerial combat the Pacific War had ever seen. 2 pilots against 60, tearing through the formation repeatedly, McCampbell calling targets over the radio with the calm of a man doing paperwork. 9 kills, Rushing destroying 6. The entire attack collapsed before a single Japanese aircraft reached the fleet. McCampbell landed on the USS Langley. Essex deck wasn't clear, with 2 rounds of ammunition left and 10 minutes of fuel. He finished the war with 34 confirmed victories, earning the Medal of Honor personally from President Roosevelt. When asked about that October morning, 2 pilots, 60 enemy aircraft, the entire American fleet at stake, McCampbell simply said, "Those must have been kamikazes because they gave us very little fight, just a question of taking our time to make sure we got one. 60 aircraft, 2 pilots, very little fight." But while McCampbell was the greatest ace to survive the war, the next pilot channeled everything into one obsession, hunting down a record that was always just 2 kills ahead of him. For 16 months, Thomas McGuire chased a number he could never quite reach, Richard Bong's kill count, always sitting 2 victories ahead of him like a finish line that kept moving. That obsession didn't make McGuire reckless, it made him extraordinary. Because rather than cutting corners to close the gap, McGuire invested everything into mastering the one machine that could get him there, the P-38 Lightning, an aircraft most pilots found difficult and unforgiving in a dogfight. McGuire threw it around the sky like a single-engine Spitfire, his wingman regularly blacked out trying to follow his maneuvers. He spent his spare time helping armorers calibrate the P-38's nose-mounted armament and had personally assembled his squadron's aircraft from shipping crates in Townsville, Australia. He knew every rivet in the airframe. Christmas Day 1944, McGuire volunteers to lead 15 P-38s as top cover over Mabalacat Airdrome, Luzon, Philippines. 20 Japanese Zeros dive from the glare of the eastern sun. McGuire destroys 3 in rapid succession. Then his guns jam. Any pilot would disengage, McGuire doesn't. For the next 30 minutes, he uses the P-38 itself as a weapon, charging head-on at enemy fighters, herding them into his wingman's lines of fire, physically forcing Zeros into collision courses until they break away into waiting guns. The next day, December the 26th, he's back over Clark Field, shooting down 4 more while single-handedly rescuing a crippled bomber under attack. 7 kills in 48 hours over Christmas. His total now stood at 38, 2 behind Bong. He never closed that gap. On January the 7th, 1945, leading an unauthorized sweep over Negros Island, McGuire hauled his tank-laden P-38 into a desperate tight turn to save a wingman's life. The overloaded Lightning stalled, snap-rolled, inverted at just 200 feet, and crashed into a pineapple plantation. He was 24 years old. Every one of his 38 victories had been scored in an aircraft prepared by his devoted crew chief, Technical Sergeant Frank Kish. McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey still carries his name today. As the Joint Base history records, Thomas B. McGuire Jr. was the rarest of individuals who combined natural gifts with sheer will and hard work to achieve immortality. And at number 1, the man whose record McGuire spent 16 months trying to break. The farm boy from Poplar, Wisconsin, who put his gun muzzles in the Japanese cockpit and never missed. America's greatest fighter ace freely admitted he was a poor marksman. Richard Bong's gunnery scores in training were mediocre, below average for a combat pilot, and his solution to that problem was so simple it was almost insane. Get close enough that missing becomes impossible. Not 400 yards, the doctrine-approved engagement distance, not 200, 50 feet. Close enough to see the pilot's face before pulling the trigger. 16 of his 40 kills came on head-on passes, 2 aircraft charging each other at a combined closure rate approaching 700 miles per hour. Because Bong had decided that the most dangerous form of aerial combat was also the most certain. On July the 26th, 1943, near Lae, New Guinea, that certainty produced something extraordinary. 10 P-38 swept into a formation of 20 Japanese fighters. Bong missed on his first pass, dived to build speed, then pulled up in a head-on charge against a Nakajima Ki-43 Oscar. Both pilots firing simultaneously. The Oscar erupted. Bong hauled the P-38 around, destroyed a Kawasaki Ki-61 Tony, turned left, killed another, then went head-on against a second Oscar and destroyed it too. 4 confirmed kills in a single engagement, and when he landed, his crew chief discovered fragments of Japanese aircraft buried in the P-38's wing leading edges. He hadn't just shot them down, he'd flown through them. He named every P-38 he flew Marge after Marjorie Vatndal, the college homecoming queen he married on February the 10th, 1945, plastering her graduation photograph across his nosart. General Kenny had once summoned Bong to his office after he looped the Golden Gate Bridge, buzzed Market Street waving at office workers through his cockpit window, and blew a housewife's freshly laundered clothes off a clothesline in Oakland. She'd complained to the military, and Kenny ordered Bong to go to her house and hang her laundry himself. Then Kenny quietly ensured Bong never left the Pacific because men like this didn't come along twice. August the 6th, 1945. The same morning, the B-29 Enola Gay lifted off to drop the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. Bong climbed into a P-80 Shooting Star jet fighter at Lockheed's Burbank airfield for a routine test flight. The primary fuel pump failed. He didn't activate the backup. The jet rolled inverted. He ejected, but too low for his parachute to deploy. America's greatest fighter ace struck the ground in North Hollywood. He was 24 years old. General Kenny wrote, "I stopped thinking of the atom bomb which had wiped out Hiroshima that morning. We had lost a loved one. 40 kills, 200 combat missions, never wounded, never lost a wingman. The farm boy from Poplar, Wisconsin, who put his gun muzzles in the Japanese cockpit and never missed." These were the 10 deadliest, but history is full of names that never made the list. Drop yours below.